Alrighty, so for week 13, I want to start off with something I had mentioned in the last video. I thought I might had you watch this video, which is factory functions, which I talked about a little bit before, constructors, which we didn't really talked about, but we use constructors in classes, but there's actually a whole different paradigm or a different way of writing this. Remember, I said classes were just constructors with syntax sugar because of Java programmers. So I feel like if you're somebody who wants to understand JavaScript more, then I would definitely, and I will provide, I haven't done it yet, at the top of this video. Again, I'm not going to make you take notes on it because it's kind of one of those things that I think you can decide what level of comprehension you want to have. And if you've heard of factory functions, I think Color Code here does a really nice job of comparing that. And he talks about something I hadn't heard prior to my understanding of why factory functions and or just the way we wrote the object back when I showed you when we did it originally. But the reason they aren't as efficient and as scalable, right, as constructors and classes. And then he does a nice comparison. So check that one out. All right, so let's look at this week. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to create a new folder from 27. Here's what I want you to name it. Implement class into mileage. So our mileage code, and here it is, right, from the ending after we did the higher order functions. Here's the output that we have. And so what do I want you to think about, and this is your challenge. We're going to start with a challenge because now that we've covered classes some, right, now let's take, and I don't want to set this up as we're going to implement classes for this whole code base. I mean, there is a way we could do that, but honestly, I think it goes beyond the scope of this class. But I want to start with just one class that seems to me fairly obvious, but it may not be. And I want to help set you up to point you in the right direction. And then, of course, like before, I'll show you what I mean. But I want you really, this first step is to just first consider. So, in order to do this, let's harpen back on our last assignment where we looked at the student. Now, in this one, we're not going to need a subclass for this first class implementation I'm going to have you do. We only need a primary class. So that's the first thing. And remember, when we're building classes, the way we've learned how to do it, we're creating objects, right? We're substantiating objects from a template, right? So in this case, because you don't need the subclass, this is the better example. So in our mileage code base, I want you to think about where is it we're creating these objects, okay? And really you could probably think about multiple places that we might be using them. Of course there is, but there's really only one place that we're creating them. So this is going to turn out to be a relatively simple class with not a lot of things in it. But what will happen is in its implementation, we will end up breaking some of the code that we will then need to fix just to get this simple class implementation done. Okay? Okay. So that's what I want you to attempt, right? I've given you hints here about where to kind of get started with this and think about where do we create our object for this class or for this code base? Where is that done? See if you can implement a class, right? As I've done before, right? If you feel like you're not equipped to write the code, then just think about, based on what you know about classes so far, what would we create the class to then use as a template to substantiate objects that we need for the mileage program? Okay, now if you feel like you want to, yeah, definitely give it a try. And again, my hints are this is not going to be a big class. It doesn't have to have a subclass. we could make this more complicated, but that's not the goal. The goal is just to see a kind of a real world implementation, at least in a code base that we already have, for just beginning the process of implementing classes to extend our knowledge. Okay. And at this point, this will be the last assignment for talking about classes until we move on to asynchronous in week 14. Okay, so that's what you want to do. Your commit message here is my attempt. Okay, and then the next video will be from me where I show you what I did to implement a simple class into the code. All right.